Hi guys, and welcome back for another brand new character build for Oblivion Remastered. This time I present to you, the Pirate. A true scallywag at heart, the Pirate takes every opportunity to benefit himself, becoming a feared name across the lands of the Empire. He wants nothing more in life than to go down as one of the fiercest, most famous pirates in Tamriel's history, and if he can make himself a fortune and enjoy a few ales along the way, then all the better in his eyes. Not a fan of pesky laws, the pirate will take for himself what he wants when he wants it, and will be no stranger to a bounty or two on his head. While the Empire stands in shock at the death of the royal family and the oncoming Oblivion crisis, the pirate seized only opportunity. As the Empire fractures and people prepare for the end times, the pirate will plunder their unguarded riches for himself, making use of the chaos and confusion to amass a great fortune. However, the citizens of Cyrodiil won't be his only target, as even the depths of Oblivion itself won't be safe from the pirate's ambition. As hordes of Daedra pile into Mundus, they might just find themselves at the pointy end of a cutlass, being cut down in a flurry of slashes before the pirate descends through their gates to claim the riches of their keeps as his hard-earned plunder. If you have something that the pirate wants, know that he'll get it, one way or another, and all the while he'll make sure that his legend only continues to grow. Now for the backstory. The pirate was born in the city of Senchal on the southern coast of Elsewhere. He never knew his parents, and didn't care to. After all, they had abandoned him as a cub on the doorstep of an orphanage. While the caregivers at the orphanage were nice enough, the orphanage was broke, and despite their best attempts, they could barely keep the building standing, let alone properly feed the many children in their care. And so it was that most of the orphans had to find their own way around, whether by begging or stealing. The pirate was one of the few that worked odd jobs for the various gangs within the city in order to get by. Criminals always had need of street urchins to run messages back and forth or to keep lookout for guards, and could pay them next to nothing, so this is what the pirate found himself doing most of his days. It wasn't glamorous, but he was able to just barely keep himself both fed and clothed. Things were like this for much of his childhood, constantly being pushed around, paid next to nothing, and spat on by just about everyone. It wasn't an easy life, but it did teach him many of the skills that would come in handy later down the track. It was only in his teenage years where things would begin to change, as the pirate found that he had a knack for persuasion. With a quick wit and a sharp tongue, he could talk himself both into and out of trouble, shake down a few extra coins for his work, and talk merchants into giving him discounts. For the first time in his life, things were looking up for the young pirate, but it wasn't to last. One day while walking home, he would be stopped by some street thugs. They robbed him of the few septims he had earned that day, and the pirate would have let it go had one of the men not spat on his back as he was walking away. While he had been insulted plenty of times before, for some reason that day he just snapped, lashing out at the thug with his claws. In hindsight, this was a dumb idea, as he was a barely teenaged boy against 3 fully grown men. The pirate was left lying face down in the mud, covered in his own blood. However, unexpectedly, what he found was that for the first time he had truly felt alive. For whatever reason, that night had inspired him. The pain, the blood, it all gripped him with a newfound determination. No longer would he let himself be pushed around, a nobody, but instead he would take life into his own hands, and make his own destiny for himself.
Of course.
The pirate started taking on riskier jobs, and with it came higher pay. He would get into brawls, and finally started to get people's attention. He would spend his nights at inns and taverns, gambling and listening to tales of adventures and faraway lands from sailors. He made many friends and far more enemies over the years, until one day a stranger in a tavern would have a proposition for him. The stranger was a pirate, sailing under a ship called the Silent Boar, and offered him a place in their crew, so long as he could acquire a worthy gift as an offering. Luckily for the pirate, he knew of a recent shipment of skooma that had arrived in town, and thanks to the reputation he had built over the years, it was easy to get himself a job protecting the shipment. What wasn't known, however, was that he was funneling information to one of the other gangs in town, who would plot an ambush to take over the shipment for themselves. When the time to escort the shipment came, a violent brawl between the gangs would erupt in the streets, and what no one noticed was that in the confusion, the pirate had piled as many bottles into his bag as he could, before slinking away into the narrow streets. By the time anyone had noticed he was missing, the pirate was already aboard with his new crew, sailing off into the distance. The first few weeks aboard were hard, and were spent either doing menial jobs that no one else wanted to do, or practicing with an old blade that the pirates had gifted him. But all that changed when the crew spotted a lone merchant vessel off in the distance. Seeing the fear in his victims' eyes as they boarded the ship, the feeling of victory as they gathered up their loot, and most importantly, the cut of gold that was bigger than what he'd made in all his previous years of life combined, the pirate knew that this was the life for him. He spent years with that crew of swashbuckling villains, sailing up and down the coasts from High Rock to Valenwood, making a good living off the loot that they'd plunder. He enjoyed every second of it, the freedom, the riches and the booze, the open seas and the sense of adventure. In time the crew made quite the name for themselves, which unfortunately would prove to be their downfall. Following a lead on a merchant vessel that had run aground after a rough storm, the crew would disembark only to find themselves surrounded and outnumbered by mercenaries. The pirates fought their best, but were quickly overwhelmed and the pirate was knocked unconscious. When he awoke, he found himself and his crew aboard a prison ship, carting them up the Nibbon River and straight into the Imperial City, where they would be turned in for a hefty bounty. The crew would be dragged into the Imperial prison in chains, where they would be left awaiting execution. Weeks went by, as each member of the crew was carted off, until only the pirate remained. The pirate waited and waited for his time to come, but it never would, as one fateful day the Emperor himself, flanked by several of his personal bodyguards, would find him there, locked away in the corner of a cell that was supposed to remain empty. For your role-playing, you'll want to be self-serving first and foremost. The pirate isn't necessarily evil, but instead only cares about himself and himself alone. You'll want to approach most situations with a "what's in it for me" attitude, and whether it be in fame, fortune or adventure, you'll want to make sure that you always receive something in return for your work. Having lucked his way into a second chance at freedom after escaping the Imperial sewers, the pirate will be eager to get back to pillaging in the near future. Firstly, however, you'll need allies, especially in the very heartland of the Empire, and as such your first order of business should be to contact the Thieves' Guild. While the pirate is more used to taking things by force, he's no stranger to sneaking around, and having access to fences and criminal contacts all across Cyrodiil will quickly become invaluable. You'll also want to partake in the arena from time to time, as while he generally prefers to avoid fair fights, chances to show off and earn fame and fortune legally will be few and far between, so you should enjoy it while you can. Eventually in your travels you'll end up slaying an innocent one way or another, and be contacted by the Dark Brotherhood, who you'll want to get on good terms with. Again, while not usually the assassin type and not really caring one way or another about Sithis, the Brotherhood pays well, and having access to one of the most feared organizations in all of Tamriel is sure to make his enemies think twice before crossing the pirate. You'll want to avoid the Fighters Guild, Mages Guild and the Knights of the Nine, as well as refuse Joffrey's offer to join the Blades, for what should be fairly obvious reasons. A central aspect of this build will have to do with Dunbarrow Cove. Upon hearing the rumours, you'll want to make your way to Anvil and claim it as your own, as this will allow you to have your very own pirate-themed base to store your plunder, as well as having access to various merchants and fencers, as well as a crew of your own to go out and pillage in your name. While Dunbarrow will be your home base, you'll also want to make use of Deepscorn Hollow as a secondary hideout. Deepscorn will act as a hidden base within the Topal Bay for both storing loot as well as resting and rejuvenating after a long day of plunder. The Dark Minion upgrade will provide a convenient source of both loot and infamy, and once you've fully upgraded the base you'll be given access to the raiment of the Crimson Scar, which will serve as your preferred piece of armor. For your Birthsign you'll want to choose the Thief, as this will provide a boost to your agility, luck and speed attributes, helping at early levels as well as saving on virtue points for you to spend elsewhere. For the class you'll want to create a custom class which I have simply named Pirate. You'll want to pick Stealth as your specialization, with Agility and Personality as favoured attributes. The major skills you'll want to select are Acrobatics, Athletics, Blade, Light Armor, Mercantile, Security and Speechcraft. At level 1 your attributes will be 30 Strength, 40 Intelligence, 30 Willpower, 65 Agility, 50 Speed, 40 Endurance, 40 Personality and 60 Luck. How you choose to allocate points per level is up to you, however I have put some milestones on the screen for every 5 levels to show you roughly how you should build your stats over time. You can always tweak these to personal preference if you feel yourself lacking in any aspects. Now for equipment. Starting off with weapons, you'll want to use a steel cutlass at low levels. If you wait until level 12 to start Dunbarrow Cove, the skeletons there will start spawning masterwork cutlasses, which will be strong enough to serve as your main weapon for the rest of the game. For armour you'll want to use the Raiment of the Crimson Scar, which you can unlock by purchasing all of the upgrades for Deepscorn Hollow. The Raiment is also leveled to your character, however respawns within Deepscorn Hollow, meaning that you can pick up a new, more powerful set every 5 levels. A helmet is optional, but I chose to go without for the main look. And with that, this lawless pirate build comes to an end. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to let me know if you have any recommendations or suggestions about my builds in the future.